Suncoast debuted at Sundance this year, and it's already found a home on Hulu. This is a personal and emotional drama, but is it one that you want to add to your watch list? While caring for her brother and dealing with her strong willed mother, a teenager strikes up a friendship with an eccentric activist who is protesting one of the most landmark medical cases of all time. Now, this takes place around late 2004 to early 2005 in Florida, where Doris, who's played by Nico Parker, is a teenager navigating through her brother's hospice. And her mom, Christine, played by Linney, she's just utterly preoccupied with the care of the sick son. Now, this also takes place in Florida at the same hospice facility that housed Terry Schiavo. And while that's not the central focus of the film, it does serve as a MacGuffin for Doris to meet and sort of befriend Paul, played by Woody Harrelson. Now, the reason I mentioned this is a personal story is because the writer and director, Laura Chin, based this on her own experiences, providing a unique insight for the storytelling. Now, story content, it's heavy, but it's not overly depressing. In fact, there's quite a bit of subtle humor that's intertwined to keep the mood from drifting down into the bell jar full time. There are sad moments, and the tone of the film is more dour than uplifting, but that doesn't necessarily make it one to skip. Nico Parker in the lead role does a good job of portraying the overlooked and neglected teenager Doris. She's likable and charismatic, but also portrays a lot of characteristics that are relatable, even if you've never been anywhere close to her situation. And she's barely acknowledged by her mom a lot of the time, and she's also extremely lonely, making her awkward in some social situations, including school. And she doesn't have any friends, but when she tries to make some, there are cringe inducing exchanges where I kind of crawled up into myself because of how unaware and innocently she just opened up for potential hurt, naively inviting peers into her life who felt a lot like they were the models for the plastics in Mean Girls. Now, thankfully, there are a bunch of moments that, despite appearing like they're going to turn tragic for Doris, at least in high school terms, things don't always unfurl the way that I thought they would, providing a pleasant surprise for the narrative and the overall tone. Now, Laura Linney as Christine, the mom, I'm not really a fan of her in this role. She executed it wonderfully, and she embodied a person that is so focused and distracted by one child's needs that she basically neglects her other child. But her character portrayal also felt like she just hadn't shed her Windy Bird persona, coming across as very biting with sharp words and attitudes, even sounding like she was berating Jason Bateman as she interacted with Doris. Now again, her performance was convincing and effective, making it very difficult to sympathize with her or get on her side, despite seeing the mental anguish that she was experiencing at witnessing the slow death of her son. Now, I think for me, it's still too close of a portrayal, and Linney really just could have used a few roles that were polar opposite of Windy Bird before taking on this role. Now, Woody Harrelson, despite being third billed, he doesn't have a ton of screen time for this. He plays a protester in the Terry Schiavo case at the hospice facility. And for this, he's basically playing a nice and caring version of his characters in Champions or Zombieland, just minus the snark. And I liked his dynamic with Doris because he takes on a surrogate role of a parent, and then as a friend to her. He's kind, compassionate, listening, also encouraging. Pretty much everything Doris is missing in her life at this moment in time. Now, Harrelson is down to earth and naturally humorous, not really cracking jokes, but taking advantage of situations to create bits of levity. And it never feels forced or even like he's acting. He just comes across as though he's just who he is, which makes his character, I think, even more convincing. Now, Doris has some classmates that she begins to interact with, and I like the mix of personalities that we get. Some are genuinely nice, others are just putting on a facade, creating this dynamic that mimics real life. And I appreciate, though, that we get to see character growth within her friends. Some are very different than what's shown on the outside. For the story and the narrative itself, it's a touching family drama, but one that also tends to keep us as the audience at arm's length. I can understand the emotions that the characters are experiencing, but I didn't feel drawn into their lives. I was always just kept at the periphery and as a distant observer rather than somebody who's brought close to get a deeper connection. Now, some elements feel like we've just been dropped into a scene, and then we have to play catch up for some of the context. Take, for example, Doris at school. It's demonstrated that absolutely no one in her classes knows who she is, like she's been invisible. And even if she is a newer student, the setup, it just doesn't support that. We're not seeing her on day one of her attending school. And the inconsistency in that portion of the story, it really made me question if I'd missed just a chunk of exposition. Now, at one point, Doris says something to a few of her classmates, and their reactions felt as if she just teleported there suddenly, as they were completely caught off guard that somebody was sitting behind them. Now, some of the messaging and the themes, they're also not addressed to the depth that they could have been, just basically scratching the surface to appear to examine them, but in reality, really glossing over some potentially deep and meaningful revelations. Doris goes to a private religious school, and many of the class discussions we see, they link back to the Terry Schiavo case, which in turn then also directly relates to Doris's brother and the family's decision on hospice. And there's a moment that Doris gets to have a brief monologue in class that disrupts the conventional thinking, and it raises some questions, but it stops there. And this was an opportunity for the film to take more of a stance, one way or the other, and then dive into the topic in a meaningful way. Another example is with some interactions that take place between Christine and a grief counselor. Their conversations, or lack thereof, they do feel real, but when there are moments of actual discussion, they're brief, and they could have been more impactful to create more poignant narratives. Now, for being just under 2 hours, this moved along efficiently. The pacing was slower at key emotional moments, but it didn't drag. If anything, some of it may actually have been rushed, especially in those areas that didn't go as deep as I'd liked. Now, this is a decent movie, and I especially enjoyed the acting from Nico Parker and Woody Harrelson. So if you are looking for something a little sweet and a little sad, you may want to give this one a go. So overall, Suncoast succeeds when showcasing Nico Parker's emotional journey through convincing family turbulence, allowing her to craft a nuanced portrayal. Woody Harrelson shines in his small role, bringing charm and slight levity while also delivering compassionate mannerisms, which also serve as a soul-cleansing salve to Laura Linney's biting and mournful performance. The narrative misses opportunities to dive deeper into the relational upheaval, but it still manages to create poignant scenes that hold meaning. And while the story itself may not be relatable, the theme of a teenager looking for friendship and connection while feeling unseen can certainly resonate with many. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and no violence. I give Suncoast 3.5 out of 5 couches. So have you seen any emotional family dramas lately that are worth recommending? Let me know about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.